You really think this is going to work?" My brother laughed as he leaned back in his chair, sipping his beer like he was watching a bad comedy. "You're too old to be starting a business." That's what I heard from the people who were supposed to love me. And just like that, the seed of doubt was planted. But I didn't listen. At 42 years old, I decided to take a chance, even if my own family thought it was a joke. I started my own business. Little did they know, I was going to show them what I was made of. When I started, I had nothing but a dream, a tiny loan, and a willpower that could move mountains. My family didn't believe in me, didn't think I could pull it off. They mocked my idea, laughed behind my back, and told me I was better off just sticking to my 9-to-5 job, that my dream was a fantasy. They said it was cute, but I could see the smirk behind their words. They didn't take me seriously, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I spent nights researching, learning, failing, and picking myself up again. Slowly, things started turning around. I remember the first big contract I signed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A proof that I wasn't just dreaming. I was making it happen. My family watched from the sidelines, never offering a word of encouragement. I continued to push forward, working tirelessly day and night. It wasn't easy. There were days I thought about giving up, days when the bills piled up faster than the income, and days when I felt like I was just going to drown in it all. But then, I would remind myself, this was mine. I was building something for myself. The first year was brutal. I had to juggle everything: marketing, sales, customer service, and being the boss. Some nights, I slept for just a few hours before getting up and doing it all over again. I sacrificed holidays, weekends, and any kind of personal time. It was lonely, but I didn't care. I kept my eyes on the prize. Then, after 2 years of struggling and pushing, the business started to pick up. I could see the growth, the momentum finally building. My family, however, still didn't take me seriously. They'd ask about the business, but only to say things like, "How's that little project going?" Or, "Is it really worth all that effort?" They still didn't get it. They still didn't believe. But I kept going. And after 5 years of relentless work, things started to change. I was no longer the underdog. The business was profitable. I had employees. I was making a name for myself. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And then, like a slap in the face, the requests started. It was my family, suddenly showing up, asking for help. "Hey, can you help me get a job in your company? I heard you're hiring. Can you hook me up with something?" I couldn't believe it. The same people who laughed at me, who mocked my dreams, were now asking me for a favor. I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I stayed calm. I had worked so hard to get here, and now they wanted in. What a joke. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind them of all the times they had laughed, all the times they didn't believe. But another part of me wanted to help, to show them that I wasn't bitter. I wanted to prove that I was successful not because of their approval, but despite their doubts. But it was a hard pill to swallow. The requests kept coming, and with them, the guilt. My own family, asking me for a handout. After all these years of being dismissed, here they were, asking me for help. It was bittersweet, and I couldn't help but wonder, would they have ever come to me if I hadn't made it? Would they have ever believed in me if I hadn't proven them wrong? I spent the next few years building my business, but it wasn't easy. I faced setbacks, rejections, and countless sleepless nights. There were moments I questioned everything, when the numbers didn't add up, when my bank account was drained from expenses, and when it felt like no one believed in me. Yet, I kept pushing forward. I couldn't afford to stop. Every failure, every doubt from others only fueled my determination to prove them wrong. Slowly, I started seeing the fruits of my labor. The phone calls became more frequent. Clients I thought I'd never get began signing contracts. The business was growing, and my confidence was finally catching up with the progress. But still, my family wasn't impressed. They didn't see the late nights or the sacrifices I made. They only saw the results from a distance, and even then, it wasn't enough to change their opinions. They'd ask me about it, but only in passing, never truly acknowledging how hard I worked. "So, how's that little business of yours going?" My brother would chuckle, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still trying to make it big?" At first, it stung, but I learned to brush it off. What did they know? I was building something real. The success didn't come overnight, but I was getting there. Then, one day, everything changed. I landed a big contract, the kind that made people sit up and take notice. It wasn't just a small deal. This was the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Suddenly, I wasn't just another small business owner. I was someone people were starting to take seriously. My family started calling more often, checking in, asking how things were going. At first, I thought maybe they were genuinely interested. But then the questions started to change. "You're doing well now, right? You think you can get me a job?" My brother asked one evening, the same one who laughed at me years ago. It felt like a slap in the face. Was this really happening? The family who once made fun of me for taking the leap now wanted in on my success. They wanted jobs, opportunities, and connections. It was as if they forgot the years they spent mocking me, doubting me. "I can get you a job, sure," I said, trying to keep my cool. "But do you have the experience? Are you willing to put in the work?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. But deep down, I knew I had to stand my ground. I had worked so hard to get here, and I wasn't about to let them take advantage of what I'd built. They didn't know what it took to get to this point. The long nights, the endless hustle, the sacrifices I made along the way. "You know," my mom said, trying to soften the tension, "it's just that we all see you doing so well now. It's hard not to want to be a part of it." She didn't get it. It wasn't about wanting to help. It was about taking me seriously when no one else did. They didn't believe in me when I started, and now that I had succeeded, they thought they could just walk in and get what they wanted. I had to make a choice: help them or stand firm in my own success. It wasn't an easy decision, but I couldn't forget the years of doubt and ridicule. My success wasn't their entitlement. It was earned, and I wasn't going to let them forget that. I spent the next few days thinking about my family's request. Part of me wanted to just give in, to offer them something, anything, to make them happy. But every time I thought about the years they had laughed at me, dismissed me, I couldn't bring myself to do it. They had never believed in me. They hadn't been there when I was scraping by, struggling to keep the lights on. I had done everything on my own, and now that I was successful, they thought they could just waltz in and take what I had worked so hard for. The thought made my blood boil. They didn't deserve it. I wasn't going to be the stepping stone they needed to climb their way up. I had built my business with blood, sweat, and tears. They had built their lives off of comfort and convenience, never having to struggle the way I did. They didn't know what it felt like to be on the edge, to take that leap of faith when no one else believed you could succeed. No one but me. I could still hear my brother's voice, the way he laughed when I told him about my idea, how he told me it was a bad investment. He was the first one to say, "You're wasting your time. You're too old for this. Stick to what you know." He was the first one to laugh when things got tough, and now, here he was, asking for a job. I should have been happy. After all, they were family. They should have been proud of me. But I wasn't happy. I was angry. Angry because they couldn't see what I had accomplished. Angry because they only saw me as a resource now that I had succeeded. They wanted the easy way in, and I wasn't about to make it easy for them. I decided to have a conversation with them, but I wasn't going to let them off the hook. I wasn't going to be the one to feel guilty for their lack of belief in me. I called a family meeting. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was time to lay everything out on the table. I needed them to understand. When they walked into the living room, I could see the nervousness on their faces. They had no idea what I was going to say, and honestly, I didn't know either. But I knew it was time for the truth. "So you want jobs, huh?" I asked, looking each of them in the eye. They all nodded, some more sheepishly than others. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Let me tell you something," I began, my voice steady. "You've spent years laughing at me, doubting me, telling me I couldn't do it. You didn't believe in me when I needed it the most. But now that I've made something of myself, you want to come in and take advantage of it. I'm not your safety net. I'm not going to be your ticket to an easy ride. You want jobs? You want something from me? You need to earn it." My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We just thought." "No," I interrupted. "You didn't think. You never thought about how hard this was for me. You never thought about how alone I felt, how much I struggled. I didn't have the luxury of family support. I had to fight for every inch of success. And now you think you can just walk in and have a piece of it because you're family? That's not how it works. Not anymore." They all fell silent, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in their eyes. My brother looked at me, guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I didn't realize how hard it was for you. We should have been there for you." "You should have," I agreed, my tone softening just slightly. "But it's too late for apologies. I'm not saying I won't help you, but it's going to be on my terms. You want jobs? You want to be a part of this?" You'll have to prove you're willing to put in the work. I didn't get here by taking shortcuts, and neither will you. They all nodded slowly, the reality of what I was saying finally sinking in. It wasn't going to be easy for any of us, but at least now, they knew that the easy way out was no longer an option. I had fought for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. It had been a few weeks since I laid down the law with my family. I didn't expect things to change overnight, but I could tell they were starting to get the message. My brother had been calling less often, and my mother, who once called every day to check in, had stopped asking about my business. I'd given them a reality check, but deep down, I wondered if they really understood what I was saying. It wasn't just about the jobs, it wasn't just about the business. It was about respect, and they had never respected what I did. They didn't understand how much I had sacrificed to get here. The late nights, the endless work, the feeling of being invisible to everyone around me. It all led to this moment. But as time went on, I started to see a change. It was subtle, but it was there. My brother, who had once laughed at me, started showing up at my office more often. Not to ask for a job, but to talk. And the conversations were different. He was listening now, genuinely listening. He wanted to know how I did it. He wanted to learn. It wasn't much, but it was something. I still didn't trust him completely. He hadn't earned it yet, but I could see the shift. My mother, on the other hand, was still a little more hesitant. She dropped by with her usual questions, but the edge was gone. She wasn't asking for anything. It was like she finally realized I wasn't going to be her fallback. I didn't need to be her security blanket anymore. That was a big moment for me. I had spent so many years feeling like I was there to take care of everyone else, but for the first time, I felt like I was standing on my own. It wasn't just about my business. It was about my life, about the independence I had built, the strength I had found in myself when I thought there was nothing left. One afternoon, a few months after that family meeting, my brother called me. "Hey, I've been thinking," he said, his voice less casual than usual. "I was wondering if maybe you could help me out with something. I've got this project I've been working on, and I could use your advice." My first instinct was to shut him down, to remind him of all the times he had doubted me. But then, I took a deep breath. I had to give him a chance. This wasn't just about him getting a job or about him asking for favors. It was about seeing if he was willing to put in the work. I had to decide whether I wanted to let go of the past or let it keep holding me back. "All right," I said. "Tell me about it. I'll listen." He went on to explain his project, and honestly, I was impressed. It wasn't easy for him to ask for help, not after everything that had happened. And while I wasn't ready to hand him the keys to my business, I realized something. He had learned. He had finally seen what I had been trying to tell him all along. You have to work for what you want, and you have to be willing to fail before you succeed. "I'll help you," I said, "but you've got to do the work. I'm not going to hand it to you." He agreed. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. This wasn't about charity. This wasn't about me carrying him. It was about building something together from the ground up. The next few months passed by quickly. My brother worked hard, just like I did. It wasn't easy, and there were moments I doubted if he had it in him. But he proved me wrong. He kept pushing forward. And that was when I realized, this was the moment. This was the change. My family wasn't going to just be the people who doubted me. They were going to be the people who helped me build something bigger than myself. Maybe, just maybe, this was what I needed all along. Not their approval, not their handouts, but their respect. They were finally starting to see me for who I was. Someone who could create something from nothing. Someone who didn't give up. And I knew that was enough. I had been working with my brother for a few months now, and I could see the difference in him. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was there. He wasn't the same guy who laughed at my business idea or brushed me off like I was wasting my time. He was showing up early, staying late, and really thinking through his ideas. I still didn't fully trust him, but I couldn't deny the effort he was putting in. He wasn't asking for a handout anymore. He was asking for guidance. That was a step in the right direction. It felt strange, seeing him change like this. For so long, I had been the one trying to prove myself to him, trying to show him that I was capable of more than he thought. But now, he was the one putting in the work, trying to earn my respect. I didn't want to be the person who held a grudge forever, but it wasn't easy to forget the years of doubt and ridicule. I had worked so hard to get here, and now, he wanted to be a part of it. But this time, it was different. He wasn't asking me for a job. He wasn't asking me to give him anything. He was asking to learn. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about me helping him or him helping me. This was about building something together, something that we both could be proud of. Slowly, I started to open up more to the idea of us working together. We had our differences, of course, but there was potential there. I could teach him what I had learned over the years, and he could bring fresh ideas and energy to the table. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was a start. One evening, as we sat down for dinner after a long day at the office, he looked at me with a serious expression. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we expand? What if we take the business to the next level?" I was taken aback. I hadn't been expecting him to bring this up so soon, but there was something in his eyes that told me he was serious. He wasn't just talking about a pipe dream. He had a plan. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't just following my lead. He was thinking for himself. I sat back in my chair, considering his words. Expanding the business was a big move. It was risky, but it could also be the next step in our journey. I had built this from the ground up, and the thought of taking it further, of involving my family in a way that went beyond just hiring them, was both exciting and terrifying. "What's your plan?" I asked, curious but cautious. He started talking, laying out ideas and strategies he had researched. It wasn't perfect, but it was something I hadn't expected. He had put in the time, the effort, and the research. He wasn't asking me to do everything. He was showing up and doing the work. And that's when I realized something else. This was the moment. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Not just for my business to succeed, but for my family to understand what I had been fighting for all these years. I wasn't just building a business. I was building something that could bring us together. Slowly, I started to see the value in what he was proposing. Maybe it wasn't about revenge or proving them all wrong anymore. Maybe it was about creating something that would last, something we could all be a part of. After years of fighting for my success, I finally saw a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this anymore. I spent the next few weeks considering my brother's proposal. As much as I wanted to brush it off, there was something about his determination that I couldn't ignore. For the first time in a long while, I saw him take responsibility for his actions. The business wasn't just my success anymore. It had become something that connected us, something we could both build together. He wasn't asking for a free ride anymore. He was asking for a chance, and that meant something. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the opportunity one had been waiting for. For years, I had been building my business alone, but maybe it was time to let someone else in. My brother had always been the one to doubt me, to think I couldn't make it on my own. But now, after everything we'd been through, I saw a different side of him. He was willing to work for it, just like I had. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. We set up a meeting a few days later. I could feel the weight of it. This wasn't just a business discussion. It was the beginning of something new between us. We were going to be partners, whether I was ready for it or not. As we sat down across from each other, I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He wasn't used to taking this kind of responsibility. He had always been the one to rely on others, to coast through life without putting in the real work. But now, he was looking to me for guidance. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. "If we really want to make this work, we have to focus on scaling. It's not just about surviving anymore. We need to grow." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride in his words. This was the change I had been hoping for. He wasn't just following me. He was thinking for himself. He had a plan, and for the first time, it felt like we were on the same team. "You're right," I said, trying to keep the conversation focused. "But scaling isn't just about more clients. It's about more structure, more responsibility. Are you ready for that?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm ready. I've learned a lot from you over the past few months. I know it's going to be hard, but I want to do this the right way." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was looking at him as an equal. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about partnership. We spent the next few hours discussing the details: hiring, marketing, customer outreach. And the more we talked, the clearer it became that we could really make this work. It wasn't going to be easy. It would take time, effort, and plenty of sacrifices. But we had something now that we hadn't had before: trust. I wasn't the only one working for this business anymore. It was ours. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan. We weren't just talking about ideas anymore. We were talking about action. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the business, but for us. It felt like we were starting over, But this time, it was different. This time, we had each other. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We worked late into the nights, refining our strategy, setting up systems, and reaching out to new clients. It wasn't glamorous, and there were plenty of times when I felt like we were in over our heads. But we kept pushing forward, one step at a time. Slowly, things started to fall into place. We landed a few big contracts, and the business started growing at a pace I hadn't expected. It was exciting, but it was also terrifying. There were days when I questioned whether we were doing the right thing, whether we had the right skills, the right resources to make it work. But then I would look at my brother, and I would see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't backing down, and neither was I. We were in this together, and no matter how hard it got, we would find a way through. As the weeks went by, I saw the impact of our partnership. My brother had become more than just a family member. He had become a true business partner. He was just as invested in the success of the company as I was, and that made all the difference. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when we clashed, but we were both committed to the same goal. We were building something that was ours, and that was all that mattered. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. My brother and I worked tirelessly on the business, pushing ourselves to the limit, and the results were starting to show. We were landing clients left and right, and every day felt like a new challenge, a new opportunity. But with success came pressure. Our families began to take notice, and the calls started coming in again. It wasn't just about jobs anymore. Now they wanted a piece of what we had built. "Hey, I was thinking," my brother said one evening, his voice cautious. "Maybe we should start looking into hiring more people, bringing on the family. They want in, anyway." I could feel the tension rise in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't want to help them, but I had spent so long building this on my own, proving to myself and to everyone else that I could do it. I wasn't about to let them come in and take what I had worked for without earning it. "No," I replied, the word leaving my mouth before I even had time to think it through. "We don't need anyone else right now. They can wait." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully agree. "I just think it might help us scale faster if we had their support," he said. "And honestly, I think it might bring the family closer." I could see his point. It wasn't just about the business. It was about mending the rift between us, the years of tension and distance that had built up over time. Maybe, in some ways, he was right. But I couldn't ignore the part of me that felt betrayed by the people who had once doubted me. The people who had never seen what I was capable of. "Well, think about it," I said, not fully committing, but not shutting it down either. The days turned into weeks, and the business continued to grow. My brother and I had become a real team. We balanced each other out in ways I hadn't expected. Where he was creative and spontaneous, I was methodical and organized. We complemented each other perfectly, and it felt good. It felt like we were building something solid, something that could last. But as the business grew, so did the pressure. We had more clients, more responsibilities, and more demands on our time. I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed at times. The thought of letting anyone else in, especially family, made my skin crawl. But deep down, I knew my brother had a point. This wasn't just my business anymore. It was ours. And if we wanted to take it to the next level, we needed more hands on deck. The decision was hard, but it was becoming clearer. Maybe it was time to bring the family in, but it had to be on our terms. I wasn't going to let them take over, but maybe they could help in the areas that we needed. The thought of it made me uneasy, but I couldn't ignore the fact that we were stronger together. One afternoon, I decided to call a meeting. My brother, my mom, and a few other family members gathered around the table, and I could feel the tension in the room. "All right," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've thought a lot about what you've been asking for. And here's the deal. If you want to help, you're going to have to earn it. You're not just going to waltz in and expect a handout. You'll need to prove that you're willing to put in the work, just like we did." There was a moment of silence as they all looked at each other, unsure of how to react. But then my brother spoke up. "I think we can do it," he said. "We'll start small, see how it goes." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it. The next step. The beginning of a new chapter. But it wasn't going to be easy. It never was. We would have to set boundaries, make sure that everyone was on the same page. But it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like we were finally on the same team. We weren't just family anymore. We were partners. And that made all the difference. It had been a month since we agreed to bring the family on board, and things were moving slower than I expected. My brother and I were still the driving force behind the business, but now we had extra hands in the mix. At first, it felt like a weight was lifted. My mom, my cousin, and even my aunt started to pitch in. They weren't experts, but they were trying. But as much as I wanted to believe it was a good move, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the work that felt strange, it was the dynamic. It was hard to explain, but it felt like the balance we had before was starting to shift. The more they got involved, the more I felt like I was losing control. We had set boundaries, but those boundaries seemed to blur every day. My mom would suggest ideas about customer service. My aunt would want to change the company's tone in emails, and my cousin started making decisions about hiring that I wasn't consulted about. It wasn't that they were wrong, it was that they weren't used to the level of responsibility that came with this business. They hadn't been there for the long nights, the financial struggle, or the pressure of making the right decisions. They hadn't earned their place yet. And now, they were beginning to act like they had. One evening, my brother and I sat down for a late dinner at the office to go over some numbers. "It's not working," I said, my frustration bubbling up. "They're trying, but they're not really understanding the work we're doing." My brother looked at me, a little surprised. "You knew it wouldn't be easy," he said. "They're family. You're not just running a business anymore. You're running a family business." I took a deep breath. He was right, in a way, but that didn't change how I felt. I couldn't just let them walk in and start making decisions without fully understanding what was at stake. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "I'm trying to give them a chance, but it's not easy. I've been working for years to get to this point, and now it feels like they think they can just walk in and take over." My brother didn't say anything for a moment. He sat there, quiet, as if thinking it over. Then, slowly, he spoke. "What if we set clearer expectations? Maybe they don't know how much it takes. Maybe we need to give them more guidance." I nodded, feeling a little lighter. He was right. I hadn't been clear with them about what it took to run this business. I had been so focused on proving myself that I didn't give them a chance to understand the real work. "Okay," I said, finally feeling a sense of resolution. "I'll talk to them tomorrow. We need to sit down and go over what's expected of them and how they can contribute. We can't just let things keep going like this." It wasn't going to be an easy conversation, but it was necessary. I had spent too many years building this business to let it fall apart now, especially not because of misunderstandings or miscommunication. The next day, I called a family meeting. I wasn't sure how they would react, but I knew it was time for the conversation. As they all gathered around the table, I could see the uncertainty on their faces. "I need to be honest with you all," I started, my voice steady. "I appreciate everything you've done for the business so far, but we need to set some boundaries. This business is more than just a job. It's something I've built from the ground up, and I can't let it fall apart because we're not on the same page." My mom looked a little hurt, but she didn't say anything. My cousin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We've been working hard, though," my aunt said defensively. "We're just trying to help." "I know you are," I replied, holding up a hand. "But helping isn't just about being here. It's about understanding what this business needs and what it takes to keep it running. I'm not asking you to leave, but I need you to take this seriously." There was silence for a few moments. Then, slowly, my mom spoke up. "I didn't realize how hard it had been for you," she said quietly. "Maybe we haven't been paying attention, but we're here now. We want to help, but we need to understand more." I smiled, relieved. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "That's all I ask," I said. "We need to communicate better. This is a team effort, and everyone has to be on the same page if we're going to succeed." After the meeting, things started to change. There was still tension, but it was manageable. My family was starting to understand what I needed from them, and I was learning to be more patient with them. It wasn't easy, but it felt like we were moving forward, together. I wasn't alone in this anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the support I needed to make this business even more successful. The weeks following that meeting felt like a new chapter in our business. My family had finally started to understand the weight of what I had built. We weren't just a team anymore. We were a family working together, each of us contributing in our own way. The atmosphere had changed, and there was a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. It wasn't always easy. We still had moments where our personalities clashed, where old habits resurfaced. But we had agreed on one thing. We were all in this together. One day, as we sat down to review our progress, my brother looked at me with a grin on his face. "You know, I never thought I'd see the day when we'd be working side by side like this," he said, his voice full of disbelief. I smiled back, a little surprised myself. Me neither, I replied, shaking my head. But it feels right, doesn't it? The business had changed so much in such a short amount of time. We were growing faster than I had ever imagined, and it wasn't just because of the extra hands we'd brought on board. It was because we had finally found our rhythm, and each of us was bringing something valuable to the table. As the months went by, the momentum continued to build. We were hitting milestones we hadn't thought possible. Our client base was expanding, our profits were climbing, and the business was becoming something we could all be proud of. But success brought new challenges. With the growth came more pressure, more decisions to be made, more responsibilities to juggle, and more competition to deal with. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about staying ahead, pushing ourselves further than we ever thought we could go. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, I sat down with my brother. We were exhausted, but there was a spark in his eyes. I've been thinking, he said, his voice serious. What if we expand even more? What if we take this company national? I paused, taking in his words. We had grown so much already, but going national, that was a huge step. You're talking about a whole new level, I said, still processing the idea. Are we ready for that? He nodded. We're not just playing small anymore. We have the infrastructure, we have the team, and we have the drive. It's time to take it to the next level. I could see the passion in his eyes. He was right. We had been playing it safe for so long, but the business was ready for more. It was time to think bigger. All right, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let's do it. But we're going to have to plan this carefully. No rushing in. We'll need a strategy, resources, and a solid team to handle it. We spent the next few weeks mapping out our expansion plan. It wasn't easy. There were so many moving parts to consider. New markets, new clients, new competition. But we were ready. We had the experience, the knowledge, and the determination to make it happen. One of the biggest changes was how we started handling our new employees. We weren't just hiring for skills anymore. We were hiring for fit. People who believed in what we were building and who were willing to put in the work. It wasn't enough to just fill positions. We needed people who were passionate about the vision we had. And that vision was becoming clearer every day. As we moved forward with our plan, there were moments of doubt. There always are when you're trying to take things to the next level. But we kept pushing, step by step, knowing that we had the support of each other. We weren't just doing this for the business. We were doing this for ourselves, for the family we had become. The first major step in our national expansion came sooner than expected. We launched in a new state, and the response was overwhelming. Clients were signing on, and we were getting noticed. It felt like a validation of everything we had worked for. But as we continued to expand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was it. This was the moment I had worked for. Not just to prove my worth, but to prove to myself that I could create something lasting, something bigger than I ever imagined. And we were doing it together.